Alright everybody, welcome to the Master Wing channel. Thank you for visiting. I hope you enjoy this controversial topic I have for you guys today. The topic at hand is why Wingspan should not have house rules. Um, this is an in-depth viewpoint for competitive players. I play a large amount of games on the Discord tournament server where there's so many different tournaments and formats, and it's a great online community where players across the globe can play. But there is an established house rule, and this is an argument against that rule. So I hope everyone can take this for what it is. It is my opinion, and not looking to offend anyone, but I definitely am hoping to see the game evolve as more expansions and cards come out, and the deletion of this house rule. So we'll see what you think, and we can try to listen to this objectively. I like this quote real quick by John C. Maxwell: "Change is inevitable, growth is optional." So like I said, with this game, more cards are coming, more powers. The game is going to evolve inevitably, but the positive growth with that, I believe with this house rule, we might be missing out on. And so I want to take that into consideration as it relates to this house rule topic. My brief preface: of course you have the freedom to play as you choose. If you are more of a game night, family night, Wingspan player, this might not be the video for you. I'm really talking for those players that play competitively, that are trying to break records, win tournaments, and score as many points as possible. Alright, so what are the house rules that we are referring to in this presentation? The following 4 birds are not allowed to be played until after the start of round 2, as they have been deemed too powerful. So these are the 4 birds we're talking about. I'm sure they likely need no introduction, but it's the killdeer, the common raven, the Chihuahuan raven, and the Franklin's gull. These are the 4 birds in question that have been deemed too powerful and cannot be played until after the start of round 2. That right now is the standard for the online Discord server. I would like to shout out to wingsplain.com. It's a great website for seeing new Wingspan content, seeing some interesting articles, some advanced gameplay options. I asked them, and they have some really great just graphics where the cards are printed clearly. So that's why you see that logo, and I wanted to give them a shout out. They should be in the link in the description below. Excuse me. All right. So the first reason against house rules: it is a deviation from the original design of the game. Obviously, this game, when it came out, was launched as is without any house rule. It passed playtesting and achieved balance according to the makers of the game, Elizabeth Hargrave and Stonemaier Games. Hundreds, if not thousands, of playtests, and still there was no alternate rule or other game mode with this rule in place. And I know that seems very obvious, but I still would like to reference that in that changing the game, we can't overlook what the designers had in mind for it. I looked in the rule book just to make sure, so we're all clear. And with the Chihuahuan raven and the common raven, discarding an egg, gaining 2 food. You must have laid an egg on another bird before you can use these powers. There's no caveat or exception. And then the killdeer and Franklin's gull. This power adds cards to the wetlands draw cards action, but it has a cost. Discard an egg to the supply. You cannot use this power if you have not laid any eggs yet. Again, no official rules mandating to remove the birds, reducing the birds' power, or delay in playing them. And so it's very tricky when you add something to the game as if the designers didn't play test this several times and still thought the game was acceptable as is. So that's the first reason against house rules. It's a deviation from the original. Um, I do, for objectivity, want to mention in the Oceania expansion, there's a board and it introduces the nectar mechanic where you can score extra points for nectar. And in the rule book, it says uh, this symbol, the wild food symbol, always includes nectar. There was some discussion: is the raven and the raven too powerful for um, if they're getting nectar? And it says, if you find that this rule makes the Chihuahuan Raven and Common Raven in the base game too powerful, remove those two birds from the deck while playing with the Oceania expansion. So, um, Elizabeth and Stonemeyer Games probably responding to uh, maybe some public question or input, said if they find that this rule makes it too powerful, of course, remove it. You're free to play however you want. But for the standard, even with the Oceania expansion, it says the wild symbol always includes nectar. And so the designer of the game, even with this new nectar board, which we have yet to see in the digital Monster Couch version, includes nectar. They still didn't deem the Chihuahuan Raven or Common Raven to be excluded from the game. All right, so other than a deviation from the original design of the game, let's get into the next reason against house rules. The term overpowered is subjective. So we're going to deep dive a little bit into the overpowered term. There is no debate that these cards are powerful, but what makes a card too powerful? And so we're going to look at some cards and see what you think, if they're powerful or too powerful. Because at the end of the day, overpowered is an opinion. Another bird that probably needs no introduction with the European expansion is the white stork. It's 8 points, 10 points with the Omnivore Expert, even if you didn't activate it at all. It goes in your grassland and you can refill the tray and pick the best card out of those 3 cards without discarding any egg. There's hardly any downside to this bird at all except for 2 egg spaces. Is this card overpowered? The common chaffinch. This bird only requires 1 food and you can tuck up to 5 cards behind 5 different birds. If you played this in the grassland on top of the egg action, you can score 5 points just by this 1 brown power. Like I said, on top of the egg activation for 1 food cost. Is that overpowered? And then we've all seen this. How many games have people lost when this has been played? You see your opponent has no food to play these 3 rodent birds, but because these birds, the Eastern Imperial Eagle and the Benelli's Eagle, can be played by tucking cards, they play this down for an 11, sometimes a 10-point play, depending on where you play it, and the egg cost. But is this overpowered to play such a high point bird essentially for free with all your extra trash cards? Here's another bird that's coming on the Asia expansion. Maybe some of you saw it. Stonemeyer's been making some posts on Facebook. The red avidavat. This has a wild nest like the Franklin's gull. It's only 1 food cost like the killdeer, but it has more points than the killdeer. It can be played in your grassland, and its brown power: give 1 card from your hand to another player if you do draw 2 cards. So essentially, you can give a trash card that you do not need and get 2 cards by giving 1 card away. Like I said, a wild nest, 1 food cost. Is this upcoming bird too powerful? Because it seems very strong at first glance. The pileated woodpecker, and some of you are looking at this like, oh, definitely not. This isn't overpowered. It's just a strong bird. But and of those that know this, of course, the pileated woodpecker lays eggs in the forest, up to 2 eggs if the bird has a cavity nest. But if the opposing player plays the wood duck right after this, Is this combination too powerful? Are they guaranteed to win? Are they always going to win or have a high percentage of winning? You're going to get all the food you want. You're going to draw cards to play big point birds, and you're going to get 2 eggs all in one turn. Is this combination too powerful? Here's another card, Abbott's Booby from the Oceania expansion. It's only 2 fish, 5 bird points, but essentially this bird at the end of the game, when you play it, you draw 3 bonus cards, and then you discard 2. And the special part about this is you may discard bonus cards you did not draw on this turn. So if you've got a couple bonus cards that haven't scored you any points, and then you play this Abbott's Booby at the end, this is a huge point swing if you draw 3 bonus cards that score you a ton of points and you get rid of the other 2 0-point bonus cards. You can imagine how many high points have been seen right at the end with Abbott's Booby. And then lastly, I wanted to add the blue throat. This is a 7-point bird in the grassland with 5 egg spaces, even if you didn't activate its power at all. You get to choose whatever food you want, nectar included. The only downside is you give it to your opponent as well. So you play the blue throat in the grassland, you're getting eggs, food, and if you couple this with the white stork, is this combination, as they say, overpowered? You can see it just continues to be an opinion on what can be the most powerful or overly powered. And then the last bird we're going to look at is the great Indian bustard. This is either on the Stonemeyer website, or maybe it was a Facebook post for the Asia expansion, but this is coming from the Asia expansion. It's 6 points. It qualifies for Diet Specialist, Prairie Manager, and Omnivore Expert. It says when played, score 1 of your bonus cards now by cashing 1 seed from the supply on this bird for each point. Also scored normally at the end of the game. So if you have a bonus card, well, I tell you what, let's take a look at an example. In this example, before playing the Great Indian Bustard, you have the Rodentologist bonus card for 8 points. You've got 8 points on Rodentologist. So let's go through the math. 6 bird points by itself. We're going to play this in the second slot. So we'll minus the 1 egg, so you've got a sum of 5. And then the 5 points plus your 8 cash seeds from the Rodentologist gives you a 13-point play. And you don't lose the bonus card points. So this is a huge bomb that can be played, and I know there's players out there that have scored more than 8 points on Rodentologist or Omnivore Expert. Is this an overpowered play? How many players are going to lose if it's a close game and then the Great Indian Bustard comes out? So you can see where I'm going at. What defines overpowered? It's just a gray area in general. No one's debating this is a strong card, but why is this house rule calling it an overly strong card? You even have to discard an egg to do it. Something being too powerful is an opinion. I think I've relayed that. The cards do not break the game. This isn't an automatic lose. Powerful cards do not guarantee victory. I think we've all had these 4 cards and still lost a game. And so to make this rule, you would think it'd be almost a guaranteed victory, and it's just not. And I mentioned this before, it's just a slippery slope to ban certain cards in round 1, especially with future cards and expansions coming. Now, what are these pictures on the side having to do with anything? I just wanted to post some very powerful aspects of different games. I know this slide alone could probably be its own presentation, but I've got Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, the Ace of Spades, the Queen in a chess game, Roger Federer, who wins all the time, or at least used to, Albert Pujols, who hits home runs. Do they say, Albert, we need to scoot the fence back, you only get 2 strikes? No, they play it as is. Excuse me. Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal. Shaquille O'Neal, 7 foot tall. Do they raise the goal to make it harder for him or to make the game more balanced? No. They let the great players be great. And so that's what I want to do with this. Let the great birds be great. It's okay to have a powerful card. It's okay to have a queen on the chessboard that can do anything she wants, basically. All right. That's the second reason against house rules. Overpowered is, at the end of the day, an opinion. Fair distribution of cards. I want to go into the distribution of cards real quick. All right, each player has a chance to obtain cards. There's no innate game advantage for a particular player. Um, as of now, there are no cards that can search through the deck, and no mechanic that can guarantee a selection of these cards. If this was more of a pay-to-play scenario, like some of those video games, or maybe you went to the store and bought some extra cards that got you an advantage, that'd be a different discussion. But this game, you start out both being able to grab these cards. I have, of course, the killdeer right here, but the Australian ibis in the Oceania expansion can look through the discard pile, but as of now, you cannot search and hand select out these birds. So it's not like you can automatically get them, which I could argue would break the game. But as of now, you can't search through the deck. Let's not forget there's 2 ravens and 2 drawbirds, the killdeer and the gull. So even if your opponent plays that, there's nothing that says you can't also play a raven, or you couldn't also play the gull if they played the killdeer. Those cards are still out there. It's fair distribution. And speaking of the distribution, let's just look at these cards in relation to the entire deck. The base game, of course, the 4 cards out of the 180, that's 2.2% of the deck. The European expansion, I believe added 81 cards, so we're at 4 of 261 cards. That's 1.5% of the deck. The Oceania expansion, I'm sure, will eventually come to the digital edition. 4 of 356 cards, added another 90 plus, 95 cards, I believe, 1.1%. And the Asia expansion, which I know we will get down the road, but 4 of 446 cards, it's less than 1% of the entire deck, 0.9%. If the trend continues, I'm sure we have at least 2 to 3 more expansions based on the continents remaining. So this percentage is only going to get lower, and this house rule that covers these 4 birds, it seems, again, more extreme than it has to be for just 4 cards out of, right now we're at 261 cards, 1.5% of the deck. Alright, so we deviation from the original design of the game, overpowered is subjective, and fair distribution of cards. Next reason against this house rule, a large impact on gameplay. I would argue too large an impact on gameplay. Let's just look at the math real quick, the rule restraint for the 4 cards in question. Round 1, 8 of 26 turns. Everybody knows there's 26 turns in the game, but 8 of 26 is 31% of the game. Obviously, the first round is crucial in determining the direction of the game and how your board is going to flow, and you're negating that, obviously, by using these 4 birds in the first 8 turns. That's a big part of the game for this one rule. And then we look at round 4. What's the likelihood of you playing these birds in round 4? There's 5 turns of your total 26 in the entire game. That's 19% of the game. What are the odds, I think unlikely, that you play a 1-point killdeer in round 4? That, if you play that in the 4th or 5th slot, that's probably a negative play. The Franklin's Gull is not a huge bird bomb to play. That's maybe a 1-point play plus an Omnivore Expert, maybe 3 points. And then the Chihuahuan Raven and the Common Raven, by the end of the game, you're trying to score as many points as possible, right? I could see an argument for maybe Rodentologist or Omnivore Expert, but surely most of the time you are going to play large or bigger point birds, or go through the engine that you've built by the end of the game. You're unlikely to discard eggs to receive more cards in round 4. You're unlikely, unless you have some other combination, to discard a point, or in this instance an egg, for 2 more food at the end of the game. So with that being said, the unlikelihood of playing these 4 birds in round 4, you've also, taken them out of 2 rounds, essentially, because you don't want to play them in round 4. So if you combine round 1, where they're prohibited, and round 4, which is unlikely, you've got 13 of 26 turns you will not be playing, much less activating these 4 cards. That's 50% of the game, and in my opinion, that is too large an impact on the game for one rule. 50% of the game, you can't activate it, can't play it. Assuming, you don't play these in round 4. Here's another question that impacts gameplay. Is this rule possibly helping the player with the raven, gull, or killdeer? So, again, this is another rabbit hole that maybe deserves another presentation, but the person with those cards might even accelerate round 2 even more by focusing 8 turns on gaining food or drawing cards. So I'm saying, if you have the raven, you've got all the food you need. I'm going to focus all my 8 turns on drawing cards. So when round 2 hits, turn 9 hits, I play the raven, and I've got so many cards because I've used my round 1 drawing them, that my round 2 is even stronger. And then vice versa with the gull. I'm going to gain all the food I need so that this gull can just go to work. Is this rule even helping some of those players that have these cards? Regardless, it's an impact on the game, either way you see it. Whether it's too severe in round 1 or it helps in round 2, the design of the rule impacts the game in a huge way, and it can't be understated. The next reason against house rules, it reduces scores. It reduces scores. So, let's go back to just the basic premise of the game. The objective of the game is to play birds and score points to win. This is a game against one of the players on the Discord tournament server. I score 103 points, which really has nothing to do with this slide, but I do want to say, for those that have played Wingspan for a lot of games, anyone can attest, probably, that the more points you score, the more fun the game is. Alright, a 103-point game is a lot more fun to play than a 85 point game, right? The objective of the game is to play birds and score points, and that makes the game fun to play. I did a guesstimate right here on the average birds played per game. I thought on the low end that normally players play 9 birds minimum, and on maybe on the higher end, an average game of 12 birds on the board. You don't see many games where the board is completely filled with this house rule. And so my question is, why? Is this rule stifling a 13 to 15 bird board? Why are we stifling 120 point, 130 point games? I'm not saying you can't score higher points with this rule. There are ways to score points. I think my personal best is 146 with the house rule. But why are we reducing these higher scores, especially now that we have game end powers and we're seeing more teal powers? Let's see these scores rise, and essentially, in my opinion, the more points you score, the more fun you have. And I'd like to see more 15 bird boards. And this house rule, I believe, is stifling that, because those birds are strong. There's no debate the birds are strong. But why are we going against the objective of the game, to play birds and score points to win? And then this is the last house rule that we're going to go in depth on. This house rule reduces counterplay. All right, it reduces counterplay. And what do I mean by counterplay? I'm interested to see what you think about this. For 8 turns, the opposing player, we're talking about the player without the raven, gull, or killdeer, will not be preparing for a counter board. So, unless you guess that the player has a raven, which it's very hard to um, build your game around an assumption or a guess, but you have no idea that this other player is going to be playing a gull or killdeer or raven. So in that first 8 turns where you should be setting up your board, you could be playing useless birds. You could accidentally be playing helpful birds to your opponent. You could be discarding counter birds that you really could have used, or you might even neglect to deny birds that need to be denied in order to beat these players. But the argument is you have no idea. It is a surprise because this person is holding on to it in round 9. You have less time to try to counteract that. So let's look at some birds that have probably come across your screen, and this house rule has inadvertently affected your decision. The hooded crow, it's a pretty decent teal power, but in round 1, it's 3 food. This may be a pass for you if you can't afford to play the cost. But if you see a raven early or a killdeer earlier, you're probably going to utilize this bird and maybe discourage your opponent from playing it. The bronzed cowbird, of course, it's a very strong bird by itself, but this card becomes a necessity, I think, when you have, one of your opposing player has a gull or killdeer. The Eurasian magpie, again, broken record, and there's a ton of pink powers and teal power birds that are effective, I believe, in countering these 4 birds. But this Eurasian magpie might not be your first choice, honestly. But when you see them play the early raven, instead of being surprised on turn 9, you might keep this and play this and take advantage of them activating the grassland. I also said you could be playing useless birds. These are just a couple pink powers that has to do with gaining food. Just a couple examples. If you're investing in the Eurasian golden oriole, it's got a wild nest and you can gain some passive resources. But then in turn 9 they play the Chihuahuan raven, and this was a useless play for you inadvertently because they're not going to be activating their bird feeder much. And the same thing with the Eurasian tree sparrow. This was pretty much a waste of resources unbeknownst to you. Then I also talked about some birds about denying or neglecting to play or pick up. The gray catbird is kind of a heavy investment. If you do not have a board that has a power that you'd like to repeat, it's hard to get 2 berries sometimes. This might be, uh, tempting to pick up, but maybe not a necessity. But when you see them with a killdeer or raven, this is a bird you must deny them, in my opinion. But you had no idea. Same thing with the Eurasian collared dove. This isn't a bird that is top of everyone's list, but you see them with a raven. Hey, let's go ahead and deny this early so they don't stack up extra points from its teal power. And then the dark-eyed junco. This bird, again, is a card a lot of people pass over. But when you see, if you were to see a killdeer in round 1, this is a card that you might pick up to prevent them from utilizing the killdeer's power, getting 2 cards, tucking their trash card, and gaining food all in 1 turn. Now you have no idea that you should be picking this card up because of this house rule. When, unbeknownst to you, your opponent's like, oh, this is the perfect card I need. And then I also said you maybe would accidentally play birds that help them. The spotted sandpiper, the eastern phoebe, and of course the hummingbirds. If they have a killdeer, do you really want to play these birds to try to help them out with food? If they have a raven, do I really want to play the sandpiper to help them out with cards? Probably not. These cards are just a handful of cards that are affected by this house rule because of the delay in playing those 4 birds, my argument is you don't have enough time to try to counteract that with the appropriate cards, whether that be a helpless or a useless card, a helpful card, maybe a pink power or otherwise. So in summary, my reasons against house rules: deviation from the original design of the game. Elizabeth Hargrave and Stonemaier Games did not mandate this house rule. It's an overpowered. The overpowered terminology is subjective. It is an opinion, and there's an argument that other birds are just as powerful or more so. And we looked at some of those. The fair distribution of cards, that each player has the opportunity to draw them or be dealt them. The large impact on gameplay, we talked about the turns, and you're really only giving yourself 13 turns to play or activate them. And again, there's no guarantee for victory. Reducing the overall scores. I don't have the metrics on this if Monster Couch released them, but why are we stifling some of these higher scores? I think more scoring is fun. Whether you're winning or you're losing, scoring points is pretty much the objective of the game. And then lastly, it reduces the counterplay with these house rules. And we looked at several birds that would be taken into consideration had you known that a raven, killdeer, or gull had been played earlier in the game. If you made it this far, I really appreciate you listening. If you totally disagree, that is completely fine. I'd really appreciate you just watching. If you wouldn't mind liking or subscribing and telling me what you think in the comments. Maybe I have something that's just completely off base. I know the intention isn't to harm with this house rule, but I think as the game evolves, it needs to be considered, or at least a topic of consideration, that this rule be eliminated from the game. Thank you guys again for watching, and see you next time.